Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third talk from today's first day of TestCon Europe 2022. And the talk is Challenges in UI Automation and How to Solve Them. Our speaker, Johannes Dienst, is a developer advocate in Ask UI. I love their motto, Humanizing UI Automation. He's, of course, focused on software quality and automation, and he'll show us approaches how to solve today struggles with UI automation with future tools. So, Johannes, it's you now.
Hello. Thanks for the introduction. I won't get into any more details about myself and dive right into the talk because that's what you're here for. The title slide is the future of UI testing. I think it sounds a little bit more concise and better than challenges in UI automation and how to solve them, but it's the same talk. So let's dive right into what I want to do is here get you thinking about user interfaces. So what is a user interface? Basically, it's the means of a human to interact with a machine. So that's a very abstract definition. What we know as a user interface here are something like laptops, MacBook Pros, anything else, then tablets, smartphones. But think of user interfaces a little bit more broadly. So if you have a John Deere tractor, for example, we had a customer who wanted to automate the John Deere tractor. They have little UI displays with knobs and buttons on the left and the right. That's also user interface because you're interacting with a machine. They are also basically only audio interfaces. Think about Morse code, for example. So everything you can interact with a machine, the means to interact with a machine is a user interface. For this talk, we want to go down the UI route because that's what the talk is about. So we focus on something like tablets, web pages, Android apps, iOS apps, everything. Somehow a little bit, it also touches the embedded devices. So that's what we are focusing on in this talk. So when we as humans on the left side visit a page, so let's visit a web page, and there's this very basic login page on the left side. So we have a heading and we have a login button, which is shiny, or there's a flat UI icon color. So our brains spin up the pattern matching machine, and you can see the pattern matching machine in action when I go out with my two daughters and look at the sky and there are clouds. Our brain makes sense of everything. So there's a pattern in everything, even if it's just noise, like the clouds outside. So if you look at the clouds, and if I look at the clouds with my daughters, then they see all kinds of animals there, horses and that stuff, because they're into horses. So everything maps to horses. For me, it's more like fantasy things, dragons, and so on. That's what I see. So even my brain, and I'm an adult now and older, there's always this pattern matching going on. So, and this is what we as humans strive to survive. Now, if we go to the login page, back to the login page, we see the button, we see the heading, login page, and then we see, yeah, that must be a button. Most often there's also something like username and password in there. We have to type, and we get that immediately. And then if we do it right, or we use single sign-on and we do it right, then it takes us to some kind of dashboard. That's what our brain tells us instantly. So what we call this, what I call this, is a visual selector. So when we select elements on a web page, then we use visual selectors all the time. We recognize patterns. We also get thrown off by patterns. So if a search bar on the top right side of a website looks like a button, we get confused a little bit because our pattern matching brain says, this is a button, but in fact it's a search page. So we have to rely on a little bit other clues like text, for example. Keep that in mind for later. On the other hand, we have a computer. And a computer, if it's analyzing a web page, let's keep that example, it doesn't see visually. It goes there, and what it can read is the source code and what gets generated out of the source code. So it's a document object model if you're talking about web pages, so the DOM in short. So what does a computer see? It sees a basic tree structure. So there's the document, there's the root element, and then comes an head element with all the metadata. Some of you may know that. And then you get to the element body where the real element lies. So we want to select this on the left side, this button. Then there comes the element button thing. And it has to go all the way down somehow and find this button. And then, yeah, I selected this with code. So we have a code selector somehow. We get to that in short. So for a computer, it is not a visual, no pattern matching. It's just an instruction here. This button, find it in this structure somehow. This is what I call a code selector. And I already talked about the DOM, and let's see how the DOM gets constructed. If you open your Chrome Web Developer Console with function 12, or your Firefox or any other browser, they usually have dev tools. You can analyze the document object model there, and the document object model gets displayed as the divs as the source code, and you can select the elements and see what styles get applied and so on. And this is a short excerpt from a testing page, and it's also on normal pages that this is the structure here. You have divs and divs and divs, and then you have classes. There are sometimes attributes in there if you're using something like Angular. And this looks a little bit like XML because more or less HTML is based on XML. And you can do two things if you need a code selector. You can do XPath. You can write an X query in XPath to find the divs, all the divs, or find a div based on classes or IDs. And with CSS3, there are even more powerful selectors for cascading style sheets. You can also use CSS selectors. This is what all the frameworks can do. And then someone came along and said, yeah, but we need cool stuff like encapsulated HTML and cascading style sheets. Let's introduce something which is not very XML standard. Let's call it Shadow DOM. And the Shadow DOM is somehow a funny name because it's in the DOM. there's no real shadow. So it looks like this. If you're getting to see a shadow DOM, it's normally not visually seen, but only in the code. Then you see a div, there's a username, and there's a shadow root under the div. And what this is basically the same as HTML. It's HTML encapsulated in a special shadow DOM. And what this does is that you can write web components or components with cascading style sheets. The normal cascading style sheets of the document get applied to that shadow root, but it can also have specific CSS only for the shadow root that doesn't spill over into the element. So what you can do there is compose all your UI or your code out of components and put them together in one structure. So as I already said, this is non-standard HTML. So XPath won't work there. The frameworks do some tricks because if you go into the shadow root, you can do XPath there also. So it's possible. But you can still use CSS selectors, of course, because the cascading style sheets of the whole HTML document get applied to the web component. So you can do CSS selectors there. So it's possible. If we were in person, I would ask, is there somebody working with older enterprise software? And usually a few hands go up. And I noticed this myself. Old enterprise software, I think even newer enterprise software, have this kind of obnoxious habit of doing some strange stuff. So, for example, only working at Internet Explorer 6 or only working in Internet Explorer because there's some exploits there you can use. And they also do things like, okay, let's embed a whole HTML document into our website, in our HTML document. There's this element called iframe in HTML, which basically allows to embed everything from another web page into your page. So this is how the integration is done. Yeah, you can do that. You can even, but you can. So you have this iframe here, and there's a document and another HTML document in there. What you can do is you can use XPath selectors here. It's standard HTML again, and you can use CSS selectors, but with one caveat. You have to move into the iframe before selecting anything from the document. because you can have duplicate IDs and such things. Yeah, that's what modern frameworks do. So let's get back to our example. We want to select something. And what we want to select something here is user email, enter the email. So this is a label, and we have a text field, and we want to select it and type something in there. That's our goal here. And when we want to search for this element here, this is our example HTML page, and this is with the modern frameworks, you always get this kind of HTML diffs and diffs and diffs and different diffs. And if you go way down, there's this input field here. And this input field has a user ID. So for testing purposes, if our selector works, you can do in something like generate XPath in your web developer console. So you click on element, say generate the XPath, and then you get something like this here on the right side, which is basically the structure all the way down with the query. Don't do this at home. It will break as soon as someone changes, removes, or adds a diffs or some other element here. Don't do this at home. So what you usually do and what development teams do to automate selecting or testing this kind of thing is they put IDs in there. And as it seems, user ID, this input field already has an ID. Then you can write a more efficient query in XPath. You say, search the whole document and give me the input that has the ID, user ID. And this is very concise and practical. You can also do this with CSS. It's the hashtag and then the user ID, so you can select something with IDs. The real problem here is, and some may have noticed this, that you're relying on the code under test to be in a certain structure, to have IDs to select something there with XPath. And you can't get rid of this problem if you're using modern frameworks with a selector-based approach. So you always have this coupling. So anytime someone changes and even accidentally changes the structure of your HTML or changes an ID, then tests automation will fail. You can combat this problem with a strong engineering culture. We'll say, okay, we have this structured HTML. If you write new HTML, then it has to look that way. The IDs are generated in this way, and you adhere to the process, then everything gets easier. But you still have to make sure that your process covers removing elements somewhere, changing IDs somewhere, so you don't get your automation or your tests shattered by that. Enough with the talking, let's do some showing. I want to show you a selector-based approach tool. I used Cypress because it's extremely fast, but there's also Selenium and Cucumber. We will see that later, that there are a lot of tools to do that kind of stuff. And we are doing this on a page called XPath practice page from Selectors Hub, which has some really fun things in there, like shadow DOMs and really strange HTML. And let's see how that works out. So what we want to do, we visit the Selectors Hub page. That's not as interesting, but let's put something in there. So what we're doing here, we are selecting with XPath the input name that has the attribute name, company. And the fun thing is there are two name company attributes, two inputs with the name company attribute. So we take the first one and then type something into the text field. So let's see if that works out. So Cypress has this new shiny thing here, which I have to bring up so that you can see it. And what it should do, it should open the web page. It's up. Yeah, and then you saw it was extremely fast. you could have missed it. So it took the company and wrote my company in there. So this isn't really that interesting. So remove it already. So let's select something with a CSS. I tried this demo out yesterday. So what we're doing here, and it didn't work, we're selecting with the ID pass and type something into the pass. So let's bring up Let's bring it up already. Yeah. That's the power of Cypress. It's a very nice development. Every time you change your spec or your automation, then it will reload and type something in there. Yeah, it already typed password in there. Yeah, so you have to believe me or we run it again. So we should see some typing in there. Yeah. So it typed password in there, which is pretty cool. Then I have something which you cannot automate because you automate on the document level. That's what I found out yesterday. Because on this page, I already mentioned it, there are some strange things going on. So if you click here, you can enter the stuff. If you're doing based on Cypress and a selector-based approach, it won't work, and that's what I wanted to show you. So you get in there, say, okay, get me the user ID. This was the field. You should type in my username. And I hope they didn't change it. So visit the selector sub page, and then this should fail. Did it type something? No, it didn't type something. Oh, there's a wait for. So okay, it said failed because the element is read only. Yeah, why is that read only? I can type in here. Yeah, but only if you put the focus with the mouse in there. So there's some JavaScript hidden in the web page that says only if you click here and have the focus, then you can type. You can't change it with a selector-based approach. So this is something you can't do. Maybe you have to write some code where you say, okay, focus this element, and then it would work. There's also some shadow DOM thing going on here. Let's see if we can show that again. So what we do here, get the username. This is a normal HTML element, and then I already showed in the presentation. There's the shadow DOM underneath it, and then find the kills element. This is the element with the ID kills, and type in super user. And if I'm lucky, it should have already focus. There it is. So let's see if that works. Your tests are loading. Okay, there may be something wrong here. Yeah, I don't think I have time to debug this now. Can we run it again? Yeah, I think it's somehow stopped working. Okay, let's go on to the slides. So you saw Cypress extremely fast. I typed it in the spec, and it already got executed. So if you're automating a web page, Cypress is a very, very good choice because it's fast, it works. You can put it into a CI/CD pipeline, and everything is fine. You got some thing going here, constraint here with the focus, but you can solve that also. Let's get to the next slide. Cypress is not the only tool to automate on formal DOM. I would say this search space of formal DOM automation selector-based approach is completely discovered. There are so many tools, they won't fit on the slide. I showed code because I like code. There's also Selenium and Cucumber in the code thing. There are more to it. But we also have some what I call graphical programming, where you say, okay, I select the elements and the selectors get generated by your tool, and you can shuffle around the workflow on what it should do, what your tool should do. There's TestDM, Froglogy, and Test Sigma, the ones I know. But there are way, way more. So automating a web page is a solved problem, in my opinion. So you already saw the smart selectors. What are those about? And let's get onto something else. At the start, we see adoption of cross-platform application, cross-platform development platforms like Flutter. There's also React Native, and Flutter is picking up extremely fast. A lot of customers we have try to automate Flutter things. And what is cross-platform automation? Cross-platform development platforms. You have one code base, and you can generate web pages, native Android and native iOS apps from it. So you don't have different development teams for Android and iOS and the web page. So you can do everything with one code base, which the cost savings are extreme here. And the apps that come out of it are nice, so really like native Android or native iOS. And we see an uptick in Flutter question Stack Overflow, and a lot of people are hopping on the Flutter train because it saves so much time and money. So what we see here when we talking about native Android, which native Android apps that do not run in a browser, we see what I call a canvas element. The more technical term would be a 2D plane. In 2D planes, I brought one example here. There's a canvas element. You can put that in HTML. They have the obnoxious ability to not be selectable. So if you draw something in a canvas element, then it's gone. You can't select it anymore. It's there, but you can see it, but it's not selectable. So the XPath won't work. CSS selectors won't work. What you can do is somehow recognize it on and use coordinates to click it. If you're on an embedded device and want to automate UI, they have this setups where you put it in there and then a hand or a stylus pen is picking with the coordinates and executing the workflows. That's what I saw already. This is a use case for visual regression testing. We come to that later, but keep in mind canvas elements are very hard to automate. So what are smart selectors? Smart selectors try to tackle this problem a little bit different, but mainly they are enhancement of selector-based approaches. And selector-based approaches have the problem if you're doing that on an ID level, then it won't work. So the goal of smart selectors is to combine the selector-based approaches with these so-called smart selectors. There's three approaches to enhance the selector-based approach and get self-healing tests. So they said, okay, if we enhance our selector-based approach with optical character recognition, for example, then you can extract text from your pictures, from your web page, take a picture and extract the text. And then we can put something in there like Lebenstein-Distanz. You say, okay, Apple, there's only one distance with the euro sign to Apple, then it's okay. This should be an apple, or the way you define the distance is important. Then everything gets mapped to Apple. So you can have this as a fallback if you can't recognize the Apple button with a selector-based approach. Then there's also picture-in-picture research. No, it's search. Where you say, okay, we want to select the login button. We can cut that out as a little picture. This is what OpenCV does in kind of a way. And you can say, find the login button, match it completely onto your web page. Is there some button that looks like the login button? It's a perfect match. And if it's a perfect match, you can select it and click it. This is picture-in-picture search. Then there's something which I want to show you in a few minutes. There's relation-based approaches. And I find that pretty cool because you can say something like, yeah, type test into the text box below of email, or click the button left of the text field or right of the text field, or below or up. So if the UI somehow breaks because you have a responsive design and the button gets shuffled under the text fields and not right of it, then you can say nearest to, and your test would still work, which I find kind of neat, and the flaky tests get less of that. And then you can say, if we have a selector-based approach and somehow the ID changed of our sign-in button here, so the ID is not sign in, but anmelden, obviously a German developer who did this, and the test fails because it can't find the button with the ID sign in. Then you can say, okay, but we have a picture of it. We have a picture of it, of the sign in button, search it, and then the tests becomes green again because you did find the sign in button with the picture. So what I would usually ask is that a good idea to implement self-healing tests? If I would be a consultant, I would say it depends, but I have a very clear opinion on this. I don't think self-healing tests are a get-all healing mechanism. You have to be really, really conscious about how and why you deploy self-healing tests. You have the problem that you have to maintain the backup methods. So if you do all three of these, you have to write them and maintain them if the script changed. So there's maintenance going on there. And you're basically masking structural error. If the ID anmelden, which is obviously not correct here in this case, still leads to a not failing test, then everybody says, yay, we have a not failing test. But actually the structure is wrong. So the masking of this can lead to other errors later. So be very conscious if you deploy self-healing tests. But what I want to show you, and this is an open source tool, it's called Tycho, developed by ThoughtWorks. They can use, with code selectors, they can use relational selectors, and that's what I want to show you next. So let's switch to our Tycho example. There. What Tycho does is bring up a Chromium browser, which it downloaded first, and then you can do something like open the browser, go to the selectors hub page, and I put some wait for in here, and then a close browser. This is not too exciting. What I really like about Tycho is that it has a more or less a human readable syntax. So if you read that code snippet, it says write Tycho test automation into the text box below submit. So even if you're not too deep into programming, you can understand what the thing does. So let's see if that is what it really does. Because I noticed the selector sub page got a little bit changed here. So let's hope it's still able to type something into the text box. Takes a while normally. Yeah. So you see, submit box, what we wanted to do into the text box below submit. That's exactly what we wanted to do. There's also nearest to, if you look at the near, you can say near submit or some kind of things. So a really neat open source, you can explore it, could be a help. Cypress has this to not so much the capacity, but you can say near. So you can also use Cypress if you say you don't want to left or right, want to find elements based on the location left or right, but nearest to it. Really cool thing. I showed Tycho because it was the only tool I could use as code. So smart selectors are mainly used in graphical programming tools like test graph, functionized smart beer, test complete. If you're going to a landing page, I haven't used any of this yet. If you go to a landing page, they're extremely enterprisey. So I'm not sure what they're doing under the hood. It's really hard to get out of this because they sprinkle some machine learning and artificial intelligence there. And it's really hard to find out what they actually do to make the smart selectors possible. But they're like Smart Test Complete is a very established brand, and also Rhinorex. So now I showed you how to do smart selectors and how to do selector-based approaches. This is the current state of the art and very explored the solution made. Now let's get on to something like a little bit more like embedded devices and native Android and iOS devices, which I mentioned before. When I started my career in 2012, visual regression testing was already a thing. And what visual regression testing is, you take a screenshot of your web page, how it looks like, and you want to find regressions into that. So if you change something, add a feature, then, for example, this login page shouldn't change. But somehow the cascading style sheets on the right side got messed up. And you take a screenshot of the left side, how it should look like, and after a build, you compare the new output, and you recognize, oh, there's this login button, it's green. And what you actually do is not really finding the login button, but take this other picture and make a pixel perfect match. If they match pixel perfect, then you say, yeah, that's okay, that's fine. The problem is browsers are not completely reliable on rendering those things. So if you don't have a pixel perfect match in the browser, if you want a pixel perfect match in the browser, renders it a slightly different way. So one pixel gets shuffled to the left or so, then this method would already fail. You have to be aware of that. That was the state I started with. But now you have some more fuzzy matching. You can say, yeah, there's some kind of, if 98% the same, then it's okay. So visual regression testing should work like that. But what about canvas elements. We didn't come to canvas element like native iOS or native Android. This is a picture of a Google map, and what you don't expect to recognize everything. But we as humans already see, yeah, there's some rivers, there's cities in there, and then we have this input field, and you can search something in there. And this is a annotation what an AI will see. So you have this, it recognize the text boxes, also recognize that there's a browser thing and a text field and so on. And everything that has a bounding box in red here is able to, an AI is able to see. And this is more or less the future is now. Yeah, that's the right one. So to see it in action, switch. Okay. And already type the right thing. So should see here now. Annotate this web page. What can an AI, a trained AI, based on UI elements, what can an AI see? And what we see here is, okay, it recognized text fields, it recognized text. It should also recognize somehow the navigation bar. You have to find it. No, you can find it. It recognized icons. So there's icons edit, even with the name. Then it recognized buttons. I'm always surprised it recognized this button here, but it could also be a text field. So what can we do with that? So we are able to detect things here. Let's see how we can type into something. So what we're doing now is automating based on operating system. So we're really typing into there. We're not copying something in there. We're really moving the mouse, and we're doing real visual testing. So everything a user has problems with is also the problem of our automation here. So you may wonder what line 11 here does, mouse left click. So when we start the tool, it spins up an UI controller, and the UI controller snaps the focus away from our browser. And then if you want to type something into a text field, it clicks into the text field, but what it does is regaining the focus, and it won't type anything. So you have to do a real left click. With that kind of automation, you also get the errors which modal dialogues or elements visually lying over the web page. And what we want to do here is type into the text field that contains the text, enter your company. That is what we want to do here. Let's see if it's able to do it. If I don't switch to the browser, then it will try to do it on my IDE. You just saw there, because I'm automating the screen I'm showing. So if you watch you could see it. If you watch the company, it should type in there, and you saw it. The mouse moved from here to there, and you can type it. So it's able to detect where the text field is, the coordinates. It gets inference the coordinates, get the bounding boxes. You can move to it, and you can automate on the operating system level. So what this gets us is automation on a purely visual level. So if you can automate canvas elements now, because it's the tool is able to recognize all the elements. I think I'm already short on time because I missed something. Can we do something more interesting? Yeah, we also that's the thing I want to show. The relational selectors, but it's possible to do this also. So that works. I want to show. So it should type into the text field below the password based on the enter password text. Yeah. Okay, that's it for the show. In this space, if you acting on purely visual level, there are not too many tools. I only found 3. I couldn't try out Tricentis Tosca. They claim they do this, but I couldn't verify it. I tried out Amplitude's Eyes, which has a little bit of different approach. It learned how to analyze layouts in web pages, which is pretty cool, I think. And you don't have this, it's perfect for visual regression testing because it learned how a layout should look. It takes your screenshots, learns how the layout looks. And if there's some boxes popping up, which are like news, for example. You can define after test row, yeah, this is an exception. Don't validate this, and you can perfectly use that for regression tools or visual regression testing. Then we have eggplants. I think they use OCR. I have to try it out, but that's what Jonathan Wright from Keysight told in a talk, that they use OCR, which is not a trained AI, but not as a picture-in-picture search. Excuse me for that. And you can also already do that with visual testing. So this tool space is not too developed, so it's kind of on the brink of getting into production-ready value here. And now the outlook. I was just told I have 1 minute left. That's cool. What can AI do in the future? And we're already seeing that future develop now. If you're watching the news, the most pressing issue AI and machine learning has to solve is visual question answering. So when you look at the two pictures here, on the left side you have a girl walking, and there's a bike in the picture. And then on the right side there's the girl walking the bike. Our pattern matching brain and our experience-based brain says, yeah, totally obvious what the left picture is about and the right picture is about. But for an AI and a machine learning model, it only infers there's a girl, this girl is walking, and there's a bike. But the question, is the girl walking a bike, is really, really hard to tell. And there's a lot of research going on there, and the models will get better with that. On the right side, we have the GPT-3. This is stolen from twitter.com level CEO. Check it out. They ask generate startup ideas and rate them. And there are already some cool startup ideas in there when you read about it. But the future is already there. We're throwing massive amounts of data, for example, on prompts who can generate beautiful art or can generate code based on one little snippet or on command prompts. So this is the real future here. And it's already implemented. So we don't want to code our tests or automation. We want to tell the automation, yeah, do that login. And it figures it out by itself. That's where we want to go with our automation. And with that, I am ready to answer the questions. I think I have to put up the comments. No. Yeah, that's it. If you have questions, I hope they're coming. If not, you can connect with me on that pages and also leave feedback if you like.
There are questions from Sini. The first one, here it is.
Okay.
Could you please
Thanks.
just read it? And read it out loud.
Is there any UI automation tool where it randomly presses buttons, fills fields, etc.? For example, if we want it to randomly do actions for 5 minutes on browser-based game. Randomly not. I think Test AI is able to learn workflows by trying them out on your web page. You can check that out. That's what I know of, which seems like kind of odd, but also cool. Learn the workflow of your application and test it for regression. I think there was a startup a few years ago, but it's I don't think it's there anymore. From Jeremias Rösler, I think was it. There's a talk about it. You can Google it. At our company, they are only testing. Only monkeys are testing. I think was the talk called. Does it work on mobile app developed in Flutter? I think the AI automation. It depends. You can create a web page with that. That it works perfectly with. The Android is easily automatable over the Android development bridge and with a special keyboard. So you can automate Android, yes. iOS is a very hard problem, even on macOS, because contrary to the belief, Apple is really strict on security. So automating iOS is hard to get. There's another question from Dominic. How does the Playwright place in your table? To be honest, I haven't used Playwright at the moment, but I will try it out. I think it plays into the formal DOM methods, I think. Question 4 from Attila. Is self-healing means it updates the ID in the test as well, or only searching for picture as fallback? The tool vendors do updates of the tests also, but mainly it's a fallback. So you say, okay, it doesn't find the ID, then we have a fallback, like picture-in-picture search. It depends on the tool. Then from Giovanna, what tool do you use the most? At the moment, I'm trying out a lot of tools. So I used Applitools Ice for testing. Then Cypress, of course, because Cypress is cool. At the start of my career, I used Selenium a lot, and I think that was also Selenium 2, and then they switched to 3. But they're all great tools. Then from Bartosz, what is the best tool to test browser extensions? I haven't tested those. I'm sorry. So you won't get a qualified opinion on that from me. I'm sorry. What is simple and useful tool that you use for testing UI regression? UI regression, what was I missed the framework. So Applitools Ice is easy if you get it running. It's extremely easy. And there was another tool, but I'm missing the name. I'm sorry. I can't get it up in my head.
Sikuli, probably?
Bitte? Please?
There was another tool similar, older a little bit than Applitools. It was called Sikuli.
Yeah, there's Sikuli. I wanted to try out Sikuli, but to get it running it's really ugly, I think. Yeah, there was a tool who takes screenshots. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't get it into my head now.
We have another question from Carolis. How do you value backstop.js?
Oh, very tool specific here. I didn't know of backstop.js. Now I have another tool to try out. I'm sorry.
Was it about Appium Inspector?
Appium Inspector for apps developer file. Is there a way to fetch it and be more stable? I would need some clarification on how that is done. Is that done with picture-in-picture search, or is it done with a selector-based approach?
Probably it's with selectors, but
yeah, I think.
Yeah, what about mobile, Johannes?
Mobile
Automation.
Mobile automation. Yeah, it's you usually use the ADB bridge, or you use some kind of browser-based app. So all the tools say, okay, we're testing on different platforms, but they testing the browsers in the browsers of the different platforms. So it's not real native automation. You can use Applitools Ice for that. You can use Eggplant for that. So because you only have the canvas plane, you can't select any elements in a native Android app. Yeah, that's the thing. Or you can use our tool, of course. But I don't want to market it here.
Another tool here, Percy.
There's so many tools out there. And I've already been on to like 2 months for testing out them all, and sometimes they're really hard to set up. So
Yeah.
no, sorry.
No, on the contrary, thank you actually thank you everyone for sharing more tools, and I'm sure Johannes will add them to his presentation next time.
Yeah, if they fit into the slide.
Yeah, the question about Appium was with selectors. And okay, one last question from Sini. Let me share it to Johannes and read it out loud. How difficult is it to upkeep the UI automation test cases? Do they get outdated quickly, or are test cases robust to not need updating after every change? The big automation question.
Yeah, if you're doing selector based, and then you have to be very strict and good. I think it's all based on the review of the code review. If there are any changes that could break tests, so you have to be very conscious about that. If you're automating on a visual level, I think that the tests are much more stable if you don't change the visuals too much. So a button should still be a button if the color changes, for example.
All right, and thank you, Dominic, for reminding me. I have missed one question from Xenia. How to test audio?
Oh, that's no idea. Is there something like audio testing?
Xenia,
I
stay
haven't
with
heard of that
us.
yet, and I'm 10 years into the industry. I haven't heard someone say, "Oh, we have to test
Then
audio."
you will also like our next session, actually, because it's about audio and video testing by Denis Lukmelis and Andrians Minins. So stay with us after the break. Do you have any more questions on Johannes' tools ecosystem? It was amazing, so useful. Thank you so much, Johannes. We could never be short of ideas how to test UI. UI is
Hard to test.
it's hard to test, even though there's so many good practices, so many tools. We know how to build powerful user experience, but we sometimes are shortcutting on test IDs.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and you shouldn't go overboard with the UI testing already. So
yes, so
it's very expensive.
thank you so much. I've had several notes myself, and definitely we should be aware of all of the tools and keep exploring more tools because they complement each other.
Yeah,
And if one tool is good for one part of the UI, another could be good for another part. We should not limit ourselves to one tool. That's my personal 50 cents, if you let me. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for all the questions and ideas. The next topic will start after the break, after the lunch break, and it's about audio and video testing.
I
So I'll
will
see
watch
you
that.
there. Yeah, we'll learn something for sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. See you.
Bye.